I still remember the sound of the wind that day. Not loud, just constant, like the mountain was breathing. I've seen a lot of strange things in my time, but that one stuck. Sometimes, you don't get answers, just a memory that won't let go. My name's Michael Donnelly, but most folks just call me Mike. I'm 71 now, been retired a little over 9 years. Used to work as an EMT out in Missoula, Montana. Spent more than 30 years in the field. You get to see a whole lot of life, and a whole lot of the other side of it too. I live just outside town now, in a cabin not far from the Bitterroot River. Place is quiet, wood stove, couple dogs. That's more than enough for me these days. Sometimes I drive out to town for groceries or to see my daughter and the grandkids, but mostly I keep to myself. Ain't much hustle left in these bones. I didn't grow up thinking I'd be an EMT. Actually wanted to be a mechanic like my old man. But life has its turns. I ended up in the service for a bit. Then when I got out, I needed work. One of my buddies had started doing ambulance runs and said they were short-staffed. I figured I'd try it. Didn't think it'd stick. But it did. Somewhere between that first overdose call and the first kid I helped breathe again, it got into me. That feeling that maybe you mattered. People always ask if it was hard. Yeah, it was hard. You don't forget the bad ones. The calls in the middle of winter where you know you're already too late. The faces of people who never expected today to be the day. But I'll tell you this. What gets you isn't always the blood or the chaos. It's the quiet stuff. The kid holding onto your sleeve. The old woman who says thank you and squeezes your hand like you're the only thing keeping her world upright. I saw good people. Broken people. People who surprised me. People who reminded me not to give up on others so fast. But over time, you start feeling it in your chest, like your heart's been storing everything and there ain't enough space anymore. That's part of why I retired. I'd gotten slower. Not just on my feet, but inside. Harder to bounce back, harder to sleep. Still, there's days I miss it. The feeling of being needed, of pulling up to a scene and knowing, all right, this is bad, but we're here now. Let's fix what we can. You feel like you've got purpose. These days, that feeling comes in quieter ways. Chopping wood, teaching my grandson how to fish, calling an old partner just to check in, and every once in a while, something will come back. A memory, a face. Sometimes it's just a smell, diesel and rain, or a certain song on the radio. And suddenly I'm back in my uniform, looking down a trail in the middle of nowhere, trying to find a man buried in mud. I didn't talk about that one for a long time, not because it was the worst. Lord knows I've seen worse, but because it never made sense. It was the kind of call that clings to you, makes you question things. And when you're used to dealing in facts, vitals, timing, well, that kind of mystery don't sit right. You know, I told my daughter once about it. Not the whole story, just a piece. She said it sounded like a dream. I guess in some ways it does. Except I was there. I remember the dirt in my nails. I remember his eyes. Anyway, I figured maybe it's time I tell it right. Maybe it'll help me let it breathe a little. Or maybe someone out there's seen something like it too. Because there's not a day that goes by I don't still wonder who the hell that man was. And why he looked at me like that. Back when I was still working, things had a rhythm to them. Not a predictable one. Not like you'd find in an office or a factory, but more like a hum you learned to live with. Every morning started early. Didn't matter if it was summer or the dead of winter, I'd be up before the sun, pulling on that Navy uniform, brushing off the frost from my windshield, sipping that burnt station coffee just to wake up enough to drive. I was based mostly out of Missoula, but we covered a lot more than just the city. Rural areas, mountain trails, farm towns. Hell, sometimes we'd be halfway to Idaho before the day was over. We had a decent crew. Good people. Tough, a little beat up around the edges like me, but dependable. We didn't have much in the way of resources like the big city outfits, but we had grit. That was our currency. We worked 12-hour shifts, sometimes longer if the calls stacked up. You never knew what was coming. One minute you were helping an old guy who slipped on his porch. The next you're hauling ass down a gravel road because a logging truck flipped into a ravine. There was no easing into the day. You were either ready or you weren't. And if you weren't, well, you faked it till you were. I remember our radios crackling all day long. That sound, it's still in my ears sometimes. Half the time it was static or someone mumbling, but when the dispatcher came through clear and urgent, everyone snapped into gear. You'd hear a location, maybe a little detail, and your brain would start running scenarios. Chest pain, could be a heart attack. Fall on the trail, could be a neck injury, could be worse. We didn't wait to find out, we just rolled. Lunch breaks were a joke. You ate when you could, usually in the rig, parked on the side of some back road with your lights off and one eye still on the radio. I used to keep beef jerky and trail mix in the glove box. Not healthy, but it kept me upright. Some days we'd go 10, 12 hours without a real meal. Didn't matter. The job came first. There were calls that took us up into the hills, out where the pavement ended. I always felt those ones more. Not just because they were harder to reach, but because you felt alone out there. No neighbors to call for help, no stores or gas stations if things went wrong. Just you, your partner, and whatever was waiting. That's the thing people don't realize about rural EMS. There's a whole lot of silence. You're driving through pine trees and fog, hoping your GPS doesn't drop out. And when you get to the scene, sometimes it's just one scared person standing on a dirt road waving their arms. You learn real quick to read faces. You walk into barns, cabins, trailers, each one its own story. Some are clean, some are not. But it doesn't matter. You're there to help. I remember one winter, maybe 2003 or 2004, we got a call about a woman who hadn't been seen in days. Her neighbor flagged us down. Snow was knee-deep. No plows had come through. We had to hike the last mile in snowshoes just to reach her house. Found her lying on the floor, conscious but weak. Turns out she'd fallen and broken her hip 3 days earlier. No phone, no family. She just laid there, waiting. When she saw us come through the door, she started crying. Said she didn't think anyone would come. That kind of thing sticks with you. We had our regulars too. Folks with chronic conditions who called often, sometimes for real emergencies, sometimes just because they were scared and lonely. You learn not to judge. A little compassion goes a long way. Sometimes just holding someone's hand while you check their vitals made all the difference. My partner for most of those years was a guy named Rick. Big guy. Quiet. Had this dry sense of humor that always came out at the worst moments, which somehow made it better. We didn't talk much off duty, but in the rig, we had this unspoken language. I knew how he moved, he knew how I thought. That kind of trust doesn't come easy. We saved each other more times than I can count, physically and mentally. What made the job bearable wasn't just the teamwork. It was the moments between calls. Pulling off at a scenic turnout for 5 minutes of peace. Swapping stories over gas station coffee at 2 a.m. Watching the fog roll in over the Clark Fork River as you drove back to base. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt solid, like we were part of something real. Of course, it took a toll. My back's never been the same. Years of lifting stretchers, hauling gear through mud and snow, climbing down embankments. It adds up. But more than the physical, it was the emotional weight. You try to compartmentalize, try to leave the heavy stuff at the station. But you don't. Not really. You take it home. It shows up in your sleep, in your silences, in the way you flinch when the phone rings. Some of my worst memories aren't even the gruesome ones. They're the quiet failures. The times you did everything right and still lost someone. The calls where you had to tell a child that mommy wasn't waking up. The looks people give you when they're waiting for good news you don't have. But I kept going. Because for every one of those, there was a save. A reunion. A thank you that hit you right in the chest. And maybe that's why I stayed as long as I did. Not because it got easier, but because I believed it still mattered. The day of that landslide call, I didn't know it yet, but it would end up being one of those memories I'd carry long after I turned in my badge. It started like any other shift. Coffee, check the rig, small talk with dispatch. Just another Tuesday, I think. I had no clue that by sundown I'd be digging a stranger out of the earth with my bare hands, and even less of a clue that he'd look at me like that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That part of my career, those last few years before retirement, that's when I started to feel things more deeply. Not just physically, but emotionally. The calls stayed with me longer. The faces became harder to forget. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was just the accumulation of years doing this kind of work. Or maybe it was because deep down I knew I was running out of time to make sense of it all. I didn't know it then, but that man buried on the trail, he'd end up being the one call I couldn't file away. That day started like a dozen others before it. Nothing special. Weather was holding steady, overcast, maybe mid-40s. Little bit of wind, but no snow yet. The kind of gray Montana morning that makes you keep your jacket zipped and your thermos close. I remember standing in the bay at the station, checking over the rig. Air tanks, suction unit, trauma bag. It was routine, but I always did it slow. That habit had saved our asses more than once. Rick was with me that day, same as most shifts. He'd brought in a box of donuts from the place near the bridge, even though I'd been trying to cut back. Didn't stop me from eating 2, maybe 3. We sat in the back corner of the station, watching the small TV mounted in the wall. Some morning show was on, people smiling too big, talking about celebrities like any of that mattered to folks out here. I think it was just after 9 a.m. when the radio cracked. It was dispatch, voice a little more clipped than usual. Said there'd been a report from a local hiker about a possible landslide near one of the side trails up in the Bitterroots, somewhere off the Blodgett Canyon area, past where the maintained path ends. She said the guy had come running into the ranger station pale as a ghost, saying he thought someone got buried. No names, no confirmation. Just a shaky report and some GPS coordinates scribbled on a sticky note. Rick looked at me. You thinking false alarm? Hell if I know, I said, grabbing my gear. But if someone's under that dirt, we're already behind. We called in to confirm we were responding, grabbed 2 shovels from the station's back room, just in case, and rolled out in the rig. It took us maybe 30-40 minutes to get close, then another 10 on a dirt road that looked more like a dried-up riverbed. At some point, we lost signal. No surprise there. Once you hit a certain elevation out here, it's just you and the trees. We found the trailhead and parked just off the bend. There was no one around. Not the caller, not a ranger, nobody. Just cold wind and mud. Rick muttered something about bad intel, but I saw the broken branches up ahead. Fresh. Something had come through here, and not long ago. We grabbed our packs and the shovels and started walking. The trail was narrow, winding through tall pines and deadfall. It had rained heavy the night before. I could still smell the damp in the soil. After maybe half a mile, the path started to climb. That's where we saw it, the section where the hillside had slumped. Trees torn sideways, dirt pushed out like a hand had come down from above and swiped it clean. It wasn't massive. Not like those mudslides you see on the news that bury highways. But it was enough to kill you if you were standing there. Easy. We stood there for a second, catching our breath, just looking at it. No signs of life, Rick said, scanning the mess. I took a step forward. Still got to check. We moved slow, carefully, calling out every couple steps. EMS, if you can hear us, make a sound. Nothing. Just wind in the trees. Somewhere a raven called out, and it made my skin prickle. We started scanning for anything unusual, fabric, movement, anything out of place. I'll admit it. A part of me thought we'd come up empty. Maybe the caller imagined something. Maybe it was an animal. I even started thinking about what I'd have for lunch when Rick stopped short. Mike, he said, pointing. About 10 feet up the hill, half buried under mud and roots, was a boot. Just the toe of it sticking out. Brown leather, scuffed, motionless. I felt my chest tighten. We rushed over, careful not to trigger another slide. I dropped to my knees, started clearing the dirt with my hands. It was wet, heavy. My gloves got slick fast. Rick knelt next to me, started working the shovel around the other side. Took us maybe 2 minutes to get enough cleared to see the leg. Then the torso. Then the face. He was alive. Eyes closed, lips cracked, mud caked in his hair. Breathing so shallow I had to lean in to see his chest move. Hey, can you hear me? I said, tapping his shoulder. His eyes fluttered open, just barely, and then he looked at me. I'll never forget that look. Not panic, not confusion, like he recognized me, like we were supposed to meet right there. It didn't make sense. I'd never seen him before. I'm good with faces, always have been. But this guy? No ID, no pack, no sign of anyone else nearby. Hang on, you're okay, I told him. We're gonna get you out of here. He blinked slow, never breaking eye contact. Rick called for air support, but we both knew we were out of range. We'd have to move him ourselves, at least part way. So we kept digging, hands numb, knees wet. My back screamed, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. He didn't say a word, just kept looking at me. Eventually we got enough of him out to check his vitals proper. Weak pulse, but steady. No obvious fractures, no blood we could see. How he survived being buried like that, I still don't know. We loaded him onto a backboard we'd carried up, wrapped him in blankets, took turns carrying him back down the trail. Slow going. Mud was slick, and every step felt like hauling bricks. He never passed out, just kept watching me, like he was trying to remember something, or maybe like I was supposed to remember him. We got him to the rig and started fluids, ran vitals again. Still no words, not even a whisper. The hospital took him in. I filled out the paperwork. They asked me for a name, and I told them the truth. I didn't know. No wallet, no phone, nothing. A day later I called to check in. They said he was gone, not dead, discharged. Walked out on his own, no explanation. Didn't even sign the release form, just vanished. I called the ranger station. They had no record of who filed the original report. No name, no description. Said the guy never came back. That was it. No missing persons matches, no follow-up, nothing. Just a man buried in the dirt on a trail no one should have been on. A man who looked at me like I meant something to him. I've tried every which way to make sense of it, still can't. That was the day everything changed for me. The first thing I remember about getting to the site was the quiet, not peaceful quiet. That kind that presses in, like the world's holding its breath. We'd parked the rig just past the trailhead. Wasn't much of a turnout, just a narrow patch of gravel with the weeds already creeping up through it. Nothing around us but trees. No sound of other hikers, no birds, no wind in the branches, just silence. Rick cut the engine and we both just sat there for a second, looking out the windshield. Neither of us said anything. We both felt it. The rain from the night before had turned the dirt to thick brown sludge. The wheels had kicked up enough to cake the sides of the rig. I remember stepping out, and my boot sank a good 2 inches in. I cursed under my breath and grabbed the pack from the back, slinging it over my shoulder, adjusting the strap so it wouldn't dig in so much. I was getting older. Every pound felt like more than it used to. Rick handed me the shovel we'd grabbed, and we both looked up the narrow trailhead. No markers, no signs, just a path of packed dirt cutting between the pine and larch. You could tell people didn't come this way often. Maybe hunters in the fall, or the odd backpacker trying to get off the grid. But no tourists, no day hikers, not this deep. You ready? Rick asked. Not really, I said. But I started walking anyway. The climb was gradual at first. Trees on both sides, moss thick on the trunks, ground soft beneath us. After about 5 minutes, it narrowed, the trees crowding closer. A couple times we had to duck under fallen limbs or step over patches where the trail had washed out. We were both breathing heavier than we wanted to admit. I was in decent shape for my age, but hauling a full pack uphill in slick conditions wasn't easy. Rick had started to sweat through his collar. I felt the sting in my lower back already. I kept looking for signs, boot prints, disturbed earth, broken twigs, and I did notice a few spots where the brush had been recently bent, like someone had come through fast, but no markers, no trail tape. No clue where exactly this landslide was supposed to be. I started to feel that familiar edge of doubt, the kind you get when a call's too vague, when you're chasing shadows. Part of me started thinking maybe this was a bust. Maybe the guy who reported it was confused or panicked. Maybe he'd seen something, but it wasn't what he thought. But then we came around a bend, and everything changed. The air felt different up there, heavier, like there was something sitting on my chest. The trail opened into a small clearing, maybe 20 yards across, and on the far side of that, there was a slope, steep, maybe 30-35 degrees, and that slope was torn wide open, a gash through the hillside. It wasn't massive, not like a rock slide that wipes out roads, but it was raw, ugly. Trees sheared off at the roots, mud piled up in waves. You could see where the earth had slid. Top layer stripped away, revealing darker soil underneath, tree roots sticking out like bones. Everything looked like it had been pushed violently downhill. We stood at the edge of the clearing, just staring. "That's recent," Rick muttered. "You can smell it." He was right. The scent was thick. Wet earth, crushed pine, something sour underneath. And there was no moss on the exposed surface, no bugs, no signs that nature had had time to reclaim it. We started moving toward the slope, careful with our footing. The mud was unstable. You could feel it shift under your boots. I took the lead, scanning the area. My eyes darted everywhere, looking for fabric, for movement, for anything that didn't belong. "Ems!" I called out, loud as I could. "If you can hear us, say something." Nothing. Rick joined in. "Hello? Anybody up there?" Still nothing, just the sound of our own voices bouncing off trees. That's when the wind started to pick up. Not strong, just enough to rattle the branches. It gave me a chill. I wiped my hands on my pants, felt my pulse in my neck. We weren't just responding to a report now. We were standing in the aftermath. I looked up the slope. It was about 30 feet to the top, and near the upper edge, I spotted something that made my gut clench. A tree had fallen, its roots exposed, and near it, just barely visible, was a shape. A dark one. At first I thought it might be a bag or a rock, but something about it didn't sit right. I motioned to Rick and pointed. We started up, slow and steady. The incline made it tough, and every few feet the ground tried to slide out from under us. I slipped once, landed hard on my knee. Rick grabbed my arm, pulled me up. We were both breathing hard by the time we got close. The shape was a boot, half buried in the dirt, just the toe and part of the ankle sticking out. Brown leather, laced tight. It was attached to a leg. I knelt down fast, heart thudding. Started brushing the dirt away with my gloves. It was packed in tight. I yelled for Rick to get the shovel. He started working from the other side, gentle as he could. You didn't want to make things worse. We didn't know how deep he was, what kind of injuries we were dealing with. We cleared the leg, then up toward the waist. The soil was thick, like cement. My hands were already soaked. The cold started creeping into my fingers. I could hear Rick's breathing getting faster too. And then we saw skin. His shirt was torn. Part of his side was exposed. Pale. Still. I reached up to his neck, searching. It took a second, but there it was. Faint. Slow. But there. He's alive, I said. Rick looked at me like he wasn't sure he heard right. Barely. But he's in there. We cleared more dirt, fast now, but careful. I kept talking to the guy, even though he wasn't responding. Hey buddy, we're here. We got you. Just hang on. Then, his eyes opened. Slow. Like it took everything he had. And he looked at me. That moment, I can't explain it right. It wasn't just the shock of him being awake. It was the way he looked at me. Like he knew me. Not surprised, not afraid, just recognition. And I didn't know what to do with that. We hadn't even gotten him fully out yet, but he didn't take his eyes off me. I said, "You're safe. We got you." But inside, my mind was racing. Who the hell was this guy? We kept working, kept talking, but I'll tell you the truth. Something shifted in me in that moment. The job changed. It wasn't about vitals or protocols anymore. It became personal. I had to get him out. I had to know who he was, and why he looked at me like that. But that came later. First, we had to dig. Digging him out was the slowest kind of urgency I've ever felt. Everything in me wanted to move faster. My brain was screaming, "He's alive. He's looking at you. Every second matters." But I couldn't rush. Not up there. Not in that dirt. One wrong move and the whole damn hillside could come down again. Or I could snap his leg, or crush his chest. I'd been through enough to know. Sometimes what saves someone isn't how fast you go. It's how careful you are. His chest was rising and falling, but just barely. And he hadn't said a word. Just kept looking at me. That part still messes with me. Most people in a situation like that, if they're conscious at all, they panic. They cry, scream, ask questions. Not him. His face was calm, focused, like he was waiting for something, or someone. Rick was working the shovel around the lower part of his body, clearing the mud from his legs. I was using my hands around the upper half, shoulders, arms, neck. I'd call out updates every few minutes, half for Rick, half for myself. I've got his left arm. It's cold, but nothing looks broken. He's breathing slow, but it's there. Rick would grunt back. He wasn't much of a talker when he was concentrating. After about 20 minutes, we had most of him uncovered. He was buried from the chest down, dirt packed in hard, like someone had poured concrete over him. It must have taken incredible bad luck, or incredible force, for the slide to hit him like that and not crush him entirely. Once we had enough exposed, I went in with my trauma shears and cut away the remnants of his shirt, trying to check for wounds, bruising, anything that could give me a better sense of what was going on inside. His skin was clammy, cold to the touch. No major bleeding, at least not that I could see. Still, there was a stiffness to him that worried me. I couldn't tell how long he'd been under, but judging by the condition of the mud and the chill in his body, it had to be hours. Maybe overnight, maybe longer. That he was alive at all was impossible. But I didn't have time to think about that. I pulled out a small heating pack from the trauma bag, cracked it, and slipped it into his armpit. Talked to him while I did it, soft, like I would with a child. "You're doing great, all right. Just stay with me. We're almost there." No response. Just those eyes. Rick cleared enough of the legs that we could start thinking about moving him. That was the next risk. If his spine was compromised, even one shift could paralyze him, or worse. We had a soft stretcher with us, something we used for extractions where we couldn't get a full board in. I laid it out next to him and started planning how we'd transfer him over. "I'll take the upper," I said to Rick. "You get the legs, on 3. He nodded. We braced ourselves. 1, 2, 3. He groaned when we lifted him, but barely. No yelling, no flinching. Just that quiet sound, like someone half remembering pain. We slid him onto the stretcher and wrapped the straps around tight. I checked his pupils again. Still reactive, but sluggish. We had to move. The hike back down the trail was brutal. The mud was worse going down than it was going up. Slippery, unpredictable. Every few steps we'd have to stop and reset our footing. Rick was stronger than me. He took more of the weight, but I carried my share. I could feel every heartbeat in my knees. Halfway down, we stopped to check his vitals again. I leaned in to listen to his breathing, and when I did, he moved his hand, just slightly, toward mine. I looked down. His fingers brushed mine. Not by accident, deliberate, small, like he wanted me to know he was still there. And then he spoke, just one word. He said, "Michael, that's my name. Not Mike, not sir, not help." He said, "Michael," clear as day, no accent, no slur, like he'd known it all along. I froze. Rick looked at me, confused. What did he say? I didn't answer. I just stared at the man on the stretcher. He was looking at me again, not scared, not desperate, just sure. We got him down the last stretch and loaded him into the rig. I took the driver's seat. Rick stayed in back with him. We called into the hospital, gave them everything we had, which wasn't much. Male, approximately mid-40s, unknown ID, buried in Landslide. Responsive but minimal speech, vitals weak. They told us to bring him in right away. The drive took about 25 minutes, longest damn 25 minutes of my life. The whole time I kept hearing that voice in my head. Michael. He didn't say anything else, not a single word. But it didn't matter. That one word. It echoed. When we got to the ER, the staff rushed out, took over like they always did. I stepped back, let them do their thing, watched them wheel him in through those double doors. I stood outside for a moment, covered in mud, arms shaking. Rick came up beside me, took off his gloves. "You all right?" I didn't answer, just nodded. Because I wasn't all right, not even close. I've been called a lot of things in my life. EMT, medic, grandpa, Mike. But not many people ever use Michael. My mother did. My wife sometimes when she was mad. But strangers? No. I told myself maybe he heard it over the radio. Maybe someone said it earlier. But we hadn't used names. Not out loud, not in front of him. Not until after he'd said it. And that look in his eyes. I still see it when I close mine. We cleaned up back at the station, washed off the gear, logged the call. I went home that night and sat in my truck for a long time before going inside. The next morning I called the hospital, wanted to check in. They told me he was gone. "Gone?" I asked. "Discharged," the nurse said. "Walked out sometime early morning. No ID, no paperwork. Security footage shows him leaving through the side entrance." Just like that. No one knew where he went. No name. No one came looking. Just a man who appeared out of the dirt and vanished into the morning. I didn't know what to do with that. Still don't. All I know is I heard my name come out of his mouth, and I saw a look in his eyes that said I was meant to be there, that I was supposed to find him. That's what the job never prepared me for. Not the trauma, not the blood, but the things you can't explain. It wasn't the mud, wasn't the cold, wasn't the long hike or the way my back locked up when we carried him down the trail. All that was just the job. I'd done worse, seen worse, pushed through worse. But it was the way he said my name. That's the part that stuck. Still does. I've replayed that moment in my head more times than I can count. Me kneeling next to him, wiping dirt from his face, trying to get a better sense of his breathing. And then that sudden touch. His hand, cold and shaking, brushing against mine. And that word, my full name, spoken like it wasn't the first time. He didn't say it like he was guessing, or like he was hoping someone would respond. He said it like he already knew who I was. Michael. Clear as day. I remember everything about that second. The way the light filtered through the trees above us. The smell of the dirt still fresh in the air. The quiet around us, like the mountain itself had stopped to listen. Rick didn't catch it right away. He was checking vitals, getting the stretcher ready. But I heard it. I felt it. At first, I froze. Couldn't move. It didn't make sense. I hadn't said my name. Neither had Rick. We used call signs when we spoke to dispatch. We were on a private frequency, no open chatter. And the man, he'd been out cold when we arrived, barely conscious when we dug him out. There was no way. But he said it. Just once. Just that word. I leaned in close, thinking maybe he was trying to say something else, something similar. But when I looked at his face, really looked, I saw it in his eyes. Recognition. I don't know how to explain it. I've seen a lot of people look at me over the years. People scared, in pain, angry, grateful, out of their minds. But this was different. He looked at me like we shared something. Like I was part of a story he already knew. And I didn't feel fear in that moment. I felt still. That's the word that comes to mind. Still. Like everything in the world paused. My hands, my breath, the birds, even Rick. Just for a second it was me and him. And that one word between us. It wasn't just a name. It felt like a memory I hadn't remembered yet. After we got him into the rig and started the drive, I kept watching him through the rear view. He didn't say anything else, just stared straight ahead. Calm. No panic. No pain that I could see. just quiet awareness. And I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more about me than I knew about him. It stayed with me all through the ride, through the ER drop-off, through the moment they wheeled him away, and I stood there watching the automatic doors close. Even hours later, after I'd showered and tried to eat something, that voice was still in my ears. Michael. I sat in my recliner that night, turned off all the lights, and just sat there. The dogs didn't bark. The wind didn't move the trees. Everything felt suspended, like something had changed, but I didn't know what yet. I kept asking myself the same questions over and over. Had I met him before? Had we crossed paths? Maybe I'd saved him years ago and didn't remember. I pulled out old call logs, checked dates and names. Nothing. No one matched, no similar incidents, no familiar faces. And then came the phone call the next morning. The nurse telling me he was gone. Gone? I asked. Left early. Just walked out. No one stopped him. No one knew who he was. He left without giving a name, without taking anything with him. Just gone. And that's when it really started to eat at me. Because I needed answers. I called the ranger station, tried to track down the original caller. The guy who said someone had been buried up there. They had no record of him. Just said a man came in, left the coordinates, and never came back. I checked every missing persons report in the county. Nothing matched. No one was looking for a man in his 40s, brown hair, average build, last seen on a trail in the Bitterroots. No vehicles abandoned nearby, no camp, no tent. He had nothing on him, no ID, no watch, no jewelry, no scars, tattoos, nothing that could help us figure out who the hell he was. I went back to the hospital 2 days later. Talked to a nurse who'd been there when he was admitted. She remembered him, said he was quiet, cooperative, calm, no confusion, no signs of head trauma. He wouldn't give his name, barely spoke, just watched the staff with that same expression I'd seen, like he was seeing something no one else was. I asked if he said anything at all. She thought for a second and said, "He asked what day it was. That was it." I said, "That's all?" "Yeah." Then he sat up, got dressed and left. Didn't make a scene, didn't ask for help, just disappeared. I stood in the hospital parking lot that afternoon, staring at the spot where the cameras caught him walking out. The nurse showed me the footage. He paused at the door, turned his head like he was listening to something, then kept walking. And I haven't seen him since. I kept thinking maybe he'd show up somewhere. Maybe his picture would pop up on the news, or someone would file a report and it'd all make sense. But no, nothing. It's like he came out of the ground just to say my name. That kind of thing doesn't leave you. Not when you've spent your whole career trying to make sense of chaos. I dealt in facts. Blood pressure, heart rate, fracture types. That was my world. This was different, and it rattled me. I started dreaming about it, not nightmares, just that moment. His face, the sound of him saying Michael, the feel of his hand brushing mine, over and over. I'd wake up in a sweat, not scared, but shaken. I stopped telling people about it after a while. My daughter thought it was stress, said maybe I was overtired, maybe my mind filled in gaps that weren't there. But I know what I heard. I know how it felt. I've thought about all the possibilities. Maybe he was some drifter I helped years ago, and he remembered me. Maybe it was some strange coincidence. Maybe I imagined the whole thing. But my gut says no. My gut says it was real, every inch of it. And that's the moment that stays with me. Not the rescue, not the digging, not the hospital. Just that word, that voice, that look in his eyes. And the feeling that, somehow, in that strange, quiet moment in the middle of the woods, we were connected. I still don't know how, or why, but I don't think I ever will. After that day, I went back to work like nothing had happened. That's what we did in this line of work. You finish the call, clean the gear, restock the rig, write the report. Then you move on to the next one. But I couldn't shake it. Not this time. There was no closure, no name, no follow-up. Just that face, that word, and a vanishing act. I remember walking into the station the next shift, and Rick looked at me like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. Just gave me a nod, handed me the clipboard, and we started the day. We both knew there was nothing normal about what we'd seen up there, but neither of us had the words to deal with it. Maybe he was trying to forget it already, or maybe he was as stuck as I was. For the first few weeks, I kept checking in with the hospital, calling every couple of days, asking if they'd heard anything, got any ID, any relatives show up, any sign of the guy. They got used to me asking. Eventually, they started giving me the same answer before I could finish my question. Still nothing, Mike. After a while, I stopped calling, but I didn't stop thinking about him. I'd be driving a call out near the edge of town, and I'd catch myself scanning the sidewalks, the bus stops, the trailheads, like maybe he'd show up again. I even drove back up to that same trail a month later, on my day off. Took my dog, brought a flashlight and some water, and walked up the path again. Not all the way to the slide, but far enough. The trees looked the same. The mud had hardened, leaves blown over the path. If someone had told me the whole thing never happened, I might have believed them. But I knew better. The weirdest part was, I started feeling like he never left me. Not in a spiritual way. I don't mean ghosts or anything like that. But in my head. Like his presence stuck with me. I'd be in the middle of a call, helping someone with chest pain or responding to a car accident. And out of nowhere, I'd remember the way he looked at me. That expression. Like I meant something. Like he knew me better than I knew myself. And then there were the dreams. I didn't talk about them. Not even to my daughter. But they came often. Sometimes I was back on the trail, digging with my hands. Sometimes I was standing in the hospital, watching him walk out those doors. Sometimes he was sitting across from me at my kitchen table, just staring, never talking, just staring, like he was waiting for something. A few months after it happened, I started keeping a journal. Never been the kind of guy who writes stuff down, but I needed somewhere to put it. I wrote out every detail I could remember, what he looked like, what time we found him, what he said, how he moved. I wrote questions too, pages of them. Who was he? Why that trail? Why no ID? How did he survive? And the big one, how the hell did he know my name? I've spent decades seeing people in their worst moments. I've delivered babies on bathroom floors and held hands with men dying in alleyways. I've pulled kids out of wrecked cars, carried old women down icy stairs, but nothing ever felt like this. Nothing ever made me question the world the way this did. There's a weight that comes with not knowing. When a call goes bad and someone dies, at least there's a file, a name, a family to call, a story that starts and ends. But this was a thread with no end, no beginning either. Just a single moment, suspended, and I didn't talk about it. Not really. Rick and I never brought it up again. We worked another year or so together before I retired, and during that whole time, not once did he mention it. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I was afraid that if I said it out loud, it would change. Maybe he didn't hear him say my name. Maybe he didn't see what I saw in his face, and if I brought it up, he might say so. He might laugh it off. And then the one thing I was sure about would get taken from me too, so I held it. It changed the way I looked at my work. I stopped assuming things. Used to be, I'd walk into a scene and already be making judgments. Who this person was, what they were into, what probably happened. But after that, I started pausing more, looking people in the eyes longer, wondering what else might be going on that I couldn't see. I started thinking about connection, about the people we pass in life without noticing. How maybe, just maybe, some of those people are meant to cross our path. Maybe we don't know why in the moment. Maybe we never do, but it happens anyway. That man in the dirt, he was meant for me, or I was meant for him. I don't know which. But I know we weren't strangers, not in the way that word usually means. And that thought, it brought me comfort and a kind of unease. Because if it's true, if there are moments in life where something bigger is at play, then it means everything I thought I understood about my job, about the world, might only be part of the story. I tried to let it go, told myself it was just one call, one strange day. But that's the lie we tell ourselves to get through. The truth is, some things get inside you. They don't fade. They don't dull with time. They sit in the background, like a song you can't stop humming, even if you don't remember the lyrics. It's been years now. I'm retired. I don't see the chaos anymore. I don't ride in the back of an ambulance or patch up broken people in the rain. But he's still with me. Not every day. Not in a haunting way. Just there. Waiting. Like he knows something I don't. And maybe that's what stays with me the most. Not the mystery, but the feeling that one day I might understand. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I'm not supposed to. Some things don't go away. I thought maybe with time it'd fade, like the other calls, the bad ones, the ones that leave marks but eventually get buried under the routine of life. I've had people die in my arms. I've held parents who just lost their children. I've watched men take their last breath with my hand on their chest. And somehow I learned to carry those things, to file them away, to let them rest. But this one never rested. It's been years, and I still think about him. Still hear his voice sometimes. Just that one word. Michael. Still see the way he looked at me like we had unfinished business. And I've tried to reason it out. I've tried to explain it away. I've run through every possible answer in my head, over and over like a damn loop that never breaks. But I keep coming back to the same place. I don't know. And that's what eats at me. I spent most of my life trying to be the guy people could count on. You call, I show up. I assess, I treat, I transport, I get you to safety. That's what I did. That's who I was. My job wasn't to ask why, it was to respond. But when someone looks at you like that, when someone says your name like they've been waiting to say it, it's not just another call. It's not something you can shake off or explain away. And the hardest part is, I never told anyone the full story. Not even my daughter. She knows bits and pieces. She knows there was a strange call, someone I couldn't identify, someone who left without a trace. But I've never told her what he said, or how he looked at me, or what it did to me. Because how do you explain something like that without sounding crazy? I started keeping it to myself, but it didn't stay inside. It leaked out into other parts of me. I'd be sitting in the grocery store parking lot, and out of nowhere I'd feel that same tightness in my chest I felt that day. I'd be watching TV and someone would say a name and it would hit me like a punch. Sometimes I'd dream about it, not nightmares, just pieces. Him, the trees, the silence, and that one word, over and over. I tried writing it down, thought maybe if I put it on paper it would lose its grip on me. But the more I wrote, the more real it became. And the more I realized I wasn't looking for answers. I was looking for meaning. Because if there was meaning in it, if there was some reason he said my name, some reason I was the one who found him, then maybe it meant that all those years meant something too. Maybe I wasn't just a body in a uniform, showing up because it was my shift. Maybe I was where I was supposed to be. But then I'd think about the other side of that. What if it was just a fluke? A coincidence? What if I'm giving weight to something that didn't deserve it? And that's what tore me up. The not knowing. The need for closure. I thought retirement would help, that stepping away from the job would give me perspective. But instead it gave me time. Too much time. Time to think. Time to remember. Time to sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and wonder if he's still out there. If he's alive. If he ever thinks about me the way I still think about him. And here's the thing I hate admitting. I miss him. Not because I knew him. I didn't. I still don't. I don't know where he came from or where he went. I don't know what he wanted or why he was on that trail. But I miss what that moment gave me. That sense that, just for a second, I was part of something bigger. That I mattered in a way I'd never quite understood before. That's hard to find again. Most of my days now are quiet. I feed the dogs, read the paper, maybe take a walk if the weather's good. My daughter checks in once a week. The grandkids visit when they can. It's peaceful. It should be enough. But some mornings, I wake up and feel like I'm still waiting. Like there's a knock on the door that never came. Like there's a conversation that was supposed to happen and didn't. And I don't know what I'd even say to him if I saw him again. I've thought about that a lot. What would I ask? What would I need to hear? But every time I try to picture it, I just see him looking at me the same way he did that day. No words. Just that quiet understanding. And maybe that's all it was supposed to be. A moment. Nothing more. Still, it changed me. I'm not the same man I was before that call. I'm quieter now. Slower to speak. More willing to sit in silence. I listen more when people talk, even when they're not saying much. Because you never know what's hiding behind a word, or a look, or a name. I've come to accept that I may never know what really happened, who he was, why he was there, why he said my name. But I've also come to accept that maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the point wasn't to understand. Maybe the point was to remember. And I do. I remember every detail of that day. I remember the dirt under my nails, the weight of him in my hands, the cold on his skin, the sound of his voice. And I remember the way something inside me shifted. Maybe we all have that one moment, that one call, that one encounter that rewrites the way we see the world. Mine didn't come with sirens or blood or fire. It came with a whisper, a name, and it left a silence that still hasn't filled. But I live with it. I carry it. And I think maybe that's enough. If you've listened this far, thank you. I didn't plan on telling this story. Not fully. I always figured I'd carry it with me to the end and just let it fade when I go. But lately, I've been thinking about what we leave behind, what we choose to share, what we don't. And I guess part of me hoped that maybe someone out there has felt something like this too. Not the exact same thing. Maybe not a man buried in a hillside saying your name out of nowhere. But that feeling, that sense that something happened to you that you can't explain. Something that stays with you long after the rest of the world has moved on. We all have those moments. Maybe you don't talk about them. Maybe you think people wouldn't believe you. Or maybe it's just too hard to find the words. I get that. I really do. But I'm telling you now, whatever that moment was, if it changed you, if it made you question something or feel something deeper than you expected, don't bury it. Don't let it rot in the back of your mind like it doesn't matter. Because it does. It matters. This job, being an EMT, it gave me purpose. It also gave me pain. It gave me nights I don't want to remember and people I wish I could forget. But this gave me something else. Something I don't even have a name for. And I'm not asking anyone to believe what I've told you. Hell, if someone else sat down and told me this story 20 years ago, I might have nodded politely and walked away thinking they'd cracked under the weight. But now I know better. Because sometimes life doesn't fit into the lines we draw for it. Sometimes it spills out. Sometimes it hands you something that doesn't make sense, and your job is to hold it anyway. So maybe this story was never about finding that man, or figuring out who he was. Maybe it was about being reminded that no matter how many people you meet in this life, there are still connections you can't explain. Some threads stretch back further than we realize. Some come out of nowhere and disappear just as fast. But when they tug at you, you feel it. You know it's real. I don't need to know everything to feel the truth in that. If you're someone who's had a moment like this, if there's a face or a voice or a second in your life that refuses to let go, don't be afraid of it. Sit with it. Let it live. Because sometimes those are the moments that shape us most. And if you've got a story like that, share it. Tell it to someone. Write it down. Or say it out loud to the trees. Doesn't matter how. Just don't keep it locked away. There's someone out there who might need to hear it more than you know. Maybe that's what I've been needing too. So, yeah, that's my story. I still don't understand it, but I remember it, and I always will. Thanks for listening.